So I actually want to start off talking to you about something that a gentleman called me yesterday and was talking about quantum computing
Okay.
and this whole idea of quantum computing in America. I think there's still some mystery around what's about to happen with AI and quantum computing,
Yeah.
but he was a part of a security council meeting, like where all these cybersecurity people meet. And this presentation was made about quantum computing and how at some point, once they unleash quantum computing in the next 3 to 4 years, like no privacy
Yeah.
will be allowed. Like you're going to have laptops and cell phones that will be easily unlocked because of the algorithms
Right.
that quantum computing can master. And so I don't know where technology goes, you know, in terms of like the practicality of it, but we're ramping up to a world where computers, AI is just going to be so masterful for people to use for good and for evil. And how does the human mind compete with it? I don't know. We're going to have to figure that out. But good morning from Texas. I know it's good afternoon in Israel. Brian Schrauger, the great Brian Schrauger, the man, the mystery, the legend. Uh, thought you had a great report yesterday. I know there's a lot more serious tone in Israel right now, so I'd like for you to just talk about what's happening. Your report yesterday spoke into a potential war. You're on the ground there in Israel, so just give everyone an update of what's happening.
Well, Iran has not yet attacked, but everyone is certain it will. They are certain they will. I was just looking a few minutes ago at a number of Iranian media outlets, and they are all proclaiming their intent to bring serious harm to Israel in response to the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the chairman of the political whatever echelon or political arm of Hamas, who was also, by the way, interestingly enough, Haniyeh was being groomed to be the prime minister of the Palestinian Authority. Mahmoud Abbas is fairly old and cannot live forever. He's well into his 80s.
Wow.
He's not very popular among the Palestinians, but because he has global presence and he's acknowledged globally as the leader of the Palestinians, they keep him, but he's not going to stay, and so Russia, China, and Iran were all grooming him to be the new leader of the Palestinian Authority, with Hamas moving into the Judea and Samaria, where the Palestinian Authority has has territories. It's important to note, by the way, that Gaza is not is they're Palestinians there, but it's different. They've been completely separated. Israel pulled out of Gaza back in 2005 or something like that, and it's they haven't been in there for a long time. So it's a very different situation. They're not blended yet,
Mm.
but there is a lot of respect for Hamas in the Palestinian territories, especially among the majority of Palestinians who are Muslims. Islam, Palestinian Christians are always just, well, you get a mixed reaction. You get some that are out there who are very anti-Israel. The Christ at the checkpoint people who are ostensibly or supposedly they're evangelicals, but they're not. They're really classic Protestant liberals. On the other hand, the Christians here and most Christians here are Catholic or Greek Orthodox, and most of them just want to get on. They make money, they make a living because they do business with Israel one way or another, and many of them would like nothing more than just have normalization with Israel and be able to get on with life. But because they're such a minority, they have to be very, 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 very careful about what they say.
Mm.
Their businesses can be destroyed. For example, after Haniyeh was assassinated, the next day, I drove up to the gym where I go to, and I noticed all the shops were closed. It's in a Palestinian Christian area, and I thought, oh, and sure enough, they had called a strike on that day, protesting the assassination of Hania, and Christians did it too. I have seen, however, that Christian shops that are not solidly in what's called Area A, which is completely under the civil control of the Palestinian Authority, Christian shops that are still under what's called Area B or C, they stayed open. So that's one way to say, hey, we're not behind this.
Are they? Is it hostile towards them? I mean, whenever I just can't imagine the tension between Greek Orthodox, the Jewish Orthodox, and the radical Muslim groups.
Well, you don't have it. I mean, because the Palestinian territories are largely cut off to Jews, you don't have any interaction anymore between many Palestinians, at least living in Palestinian territories, and Jews. There are a lot of Arabs that have interaction that are Israeli. About 2 million Israelis are Arab, and they are fully integrated into the culture. They don't, they have their own political views. They vary depending on who they are and where they live and what they do. But a Supreme Court justice of Israel was an Arab. Arabs have served in the highest levels of government and in the IDF. So one thing that I come across fairly often is the idea that all Arabs somehow are bad, and that's simply not true.
Right,
This is not an ethnic problem. It's an ideological one. And the ideology is one of, let's call it radical Islam. And this ideology has infected not just Arabs, it's infected Persians in Iran, Turks in Turkey, Egyptians who are not Arabs in Egypt. Indonesia is full of Muslims. Western China, they have put a lot of their Muslims in prison camps, kind of. And Russia has a big Muslim population. So it's not an ethnic issue, it's an ideological one.
And where do they side? So there's tension there. I just noticed that Israel told some European countries, if Iran attacks us, we are going straight for their nuclear sites. And the rhetoric there, meaning that, if we're going to be attacked, we're going to strike back, and we're just going to go ahead and finish this thing off. But does that bring unification together? I mean, does that like bolster the Israeli community? Does that sort of begin to create with even the Muslim groups that may not be necessarily a part of the radical Islam? Is there some sort of time where now there's a side that really wants to protect Israel and another side that really wants to see Israel destroyed? Does that start to begin to unify people who would typically not be connected? Does that add to that, or does that take away from it? I'm kind of curious, just the mindset over there in the Middle East. Are people on Israel's side when it comes to a potential war with Iran, or are they on Iran's side?
Christian Palestinians and that I've run into, that I talk to, and I have a fair amount of interaction with a few, have sometimes expressed to me the opinion that this is not our war. And they were, at the time when I was heard this, we were dealing only with Hamas in Gaza. I'm saying, it's the Muslims and the Jews. It's their war, Israelis and Muslims. We're not part of it. We want to stay out of it. And so that's one approach. In terms of what's happening now and what Israel may do after Iran attacks, which it will do, no, right now everyone's is just on pins and needles about the attack. They're not really focusing on what Israel will do in response. It's very tense. Everyone knows that the proverbial, if you will, axe is about to fall, and we don't know when. It could be any minute. When I filed the report that went up yesterday on Tuesday, I was recording on Monday, and the Secretary of State for the U.S. had said, "Oh, well, the attack might happen on Monday." So I didn't, there was a lot of concern that it could happen before the report even got up. It hasn't happened yet. And emotionally, what goes on here is everyone has to get on with work and life, but it's not easy to sleep at night. You wake up in the middle of the night and sometimes can't go back to sleep.
I imagine
this across the board. And you're thinking, okay, do I have what I need? If the war begins and the electricity goes out, what will I do? A lot of people have purchased generators. I don't have one. I should, but I don't.
Do you know somebody who does have one?
Well, I think so. Yes. So I have a place I can go and get electricity, I think, if I'll need it. But, that people are thinking about water. They're thinking about where do we go for shelter? I mean, you don't really go any place these days without thinking, okay, where will I go if the attack begins when I'm out now? I mean, tonight I have to go water plants for a friend of mine who's out of town. And so I will do that, but I will also be keeping in mind, what I need to do in case the attack begins while I'm on the road or while I'm at his home. These things consume one's attention here.
So these defense systems that you have in Israel, which have great names, by the way, I don't know who's in the naming side of it, but the Iron Dome, the Magic Wand, the confidence level in those protecting the general public, is it high? Is it sort of it's a first line of defense, but eventually those things kind of give way if it's worse? And you mentioned EMPs, which I think it's important to talk about because EMPs are probably the most drastic, non-lethal, but potentially cataclysmic in the sense that it ruins all systems.
Well, Iron Dome, David's Sling, David's Arrow, and there's a new one coming out that reportedly has sometimes been in trial use, but there's no official announcement of it. It's called, what's it called? Iron Beam, which is a laser defense system. It shoots lasers at drones and at missiles. It has a range of about 7 kilometers or say 2.5, 3 miles at the most. But it's much cheaper to use, and it can take out smaller things like drones. And there are even some ships that are being armed with it now to take out drone swarms, because drones are going to be the really big problem in years to come. And especially if they can do swarms, they can make them do anything. And when you have a 10,000 bees coming at you, you can't just shoot down 10,000 bees. How do you stop them? And that's kind of what drones are like, or in terms of what Revelation, they're like wasps, or coming up out of the pit. That's a very good metaphor.
Crazy. Yeah, that is
metaphor for how these drone swarms work and will work. It's an entirely different kind of warfare. So yes, there's a fair degree of confidence of the ability of these various systems to protect against missiles and to some degree drones, but it's not perfect. On the one hand, everyone knows, studies have been published here, that if, for example, Hezbollah unleashes its arsenal of 150,000 to maybe several 100,000 more missiles against Israel, firing, say, 4,000 or 5,000 missiles a day or more, at least 10% will get through. Well, 10% of 5,000 is 500, right?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of missiles hitting targets in Israel. And the Hezbollah arsenal can hit anywhere in Israel, from the north to the south. So it's not perfect. And then we also learned a really good lesson, a hard but good lesson in Gaza on October 7th. Israel was very, very proud and dependent on the wall and the electronic systems and all the high tech that they put around Gaza to protect against an incursion. And, they were too confident. And what we learned was, Hamas figured out ways to get around it. And even low-tech things, like they would use drones and then they would drop them on top of radio towers and take out the radio towers, and that took out communications.
Yep.
They dropped them on top of tanks that had protection on all sides around, but not on top, and killed people. They came in on gliders, and they used motorcycles once they got in. And so high tech does not protect against all low tech assaults. So right now, Hezbollah has been firing over the last 8, 9 months, 10 months now. They've been firing anti-tank missiles from Lebanon into northern Israel. Well, anti-tank missiles cannot be detected or intercepted, and they're very deadly. And they've had some drones get through as well. So. And on another issue,
how good is the intel coming into Israel? I mean, how reliable is it because I would think the worst case scenario is somebody smuggles in, a nuke, a suitcase-sized nuke, or something that could completely wipe out. And obviously, with Scripture, you don't see that playing out, because a nuclear bomb would decimate that region for a long period of time. But that's your worst case scenario, is somebody comes in with some sort of high-powered, smaller size but high-powered explosive device. When you mentioned last week on tunnel systems and ways to sort of like infiltrate the borders, and in America we have a lot of landmass. In Israel, you have very limited landmass with a lot of different ways to get in.
Yeah, think New Jersey. It's a
exactly. Our airport, DFW airport, they say it's the size of Manhattan Island. We have a lot of land here, a lot of space.
Yeah.
You guys are limited. So how does that play out for the intel, for the ground game, being able to capture and because you're talking about all that stuff coming from the sky, but I would imagine stuff's coming in from the borders as well.
Right, and that's one way too that one component this attack may take. There may be a ground incursion from Hezbollah. Hezbollah has a special forces unit that they have been developing for years, and they actually put up videos showing what they intend to do. I think I featured one of their videos once in one of my reports. They have well-laid plans. In fact, everything that Hamas did on October 7, they stole from Hezbollah. Hezbollah had the identical same game plan, and it was publicized. Everyone knew it, which is why here, people, especially in the north, fully expected that at the same time things erupted in Gaza, they were going to happen from Lebanon. And there was a lot of fear up north. It didn't, but as we now know, Hezbollah has come in and been firing thousands of missiles into northern Israel, rockets, and has effectively taken away Israel's sovereignty over much of the far north.
Yeah, it's one of those times where you're just wondering what's next. It's got to be in the minds and hearts of everyone. One thing I would say though is, just globally speaking, there seems to be this sense of urgency for end of the world. Even I saw Costco the other day. There was some sort of post about how survival gear at Costco, survival supplies, was a big part of like sales nowadays. Is just people are you're worried. They're worried about what's going to come next. How can we survive if the worst case scenario happens? I would just be curious to know, what is it in Israel in terms of a religious mindset towards like the play out of this. What does this mean? What are they expecting? Because we obviously expect the return of Christ, and I know there's a Messiah in their narrative as well, but our Messiah is different in terms of who that is and what that looks like. How is that even talked about there in terms of an end times, end of world scenario?
I don't hear it very much among what we call modern Orthodox, which are Orthodox Jews, but they're not dressed in black. They dressed in Western clothing. The men will wear kippahs, and but they will look like Westerners. There is, however, among Orthodox or the ultra-Orthodox, those who are Haredim, in various sects, we're hearing a lot of talk about these are the days of Messiah. Messiah is going to come anytime. And so that narrative is very much out there right now. It's not, I don't know that it's all together throughout the Israeli culture, but the narrative is very, very definitely there that among really religious observant Jews, Messiah is coming. These are the days of Messiah. He's going to appear anytime. That narrative is there.
And do you feel like with that kind of part in their mind that it's immediate or still distant?
No, the feeling is it's very imminent.
And how do you personally feel that's all going to play out?
I don't know. You know,
I'm waiting, Brian. Tell me when when all this is going to come to an end, because
I don't know.
it's time to wrap it up.
I think my perspective is that sometimes it's very easy for us to be so concerned about how things fit into a biblical eschatological narrative that we're not really connecting with reality on the ground. We're looking at it and we're stepping back, oh, how does that fit in? You know, is this Ezekiel 38? You know, where does this show up in Revelation? Is this the Antichrist? Is that the Antichrist? And as a result, we're not really connecting with the reality of what's happening now. And I think it's very important to connect with what people are experiencing here in Israel. What is it like? Yes, the biblical narrative is there. There's a lot of mystery, though, about how exactly things will play out. I have a good friend who says, he says, and I'll ask you, I said, Brent, do you know about in Revelation where it talks about there will be 30 minutes of silence in heaven? Do you remember that?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's okay. It's in there. They said I forget which chapter it's in, but it's about.
It says 30 minutes?
There are going to be 30 minutes of silence, right?
Yeah, I didn't know it was so direct to half an hour.
Yeah, so my friend says the reason for that is so that prophecy teachers can all adjust their charts. Because his point is we're not going to see how everything fits really until we're in it or even past it. And then we're going to say, oh, that's how this was that's what this was, right? And I think we can be so busy trying to figure out what's what that we're not fulfilling our obligation to represent Yeshua now in loving our neighbors as ourselves, in being there for them, and in identifying with their fear, their grief, their sorrow, their joys. I would suggest that's a far, far more important thing for us to do than to try to figure out how every little thing that we're going through, oh, how does this fit? Where does that go? This actually detracts and I think diminishes our witness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And it's really, I think it's almost like political analysis. It's almost, one of these things where it really feeds something to want to try and figure out what's happening in the world, how it fits into end time scenario and Bible prophecy. I do feel like it's valuable for us as a community of believers to be anticipating and watching and waiting, encouraging one another to see, there's, Apophis, this meteor that's headed towards the earth, has a nickname Wormwood. It's like, how does that play into this scenario of, could it, what would it? I think what's dangerous is playing the Antichrist bingo game and, waiting for that to play out, because this is just my personal opinion. I have absolutely zero eschatology degrees. So just my personal opinion. I started the conversation by alluding to quantum computing and AI, but there will be a time where we won't know who's real and who's not real. Yeah. And there could be a perfect human created by some sort of, AI system that solves all the problems. And you can't buy or sell without the mark of the beast, because it's so good at understanding that privacy thing we talked about in the beginning of the show being gone with quantum computing. It would solve it by giving you some sort of identification that only it could resolve. And we're not that far from those kinds of scenarios where people
Right.
actually, I think, would like to look at, especially younger people. We're in a different generation where, I don't want a fake silhouette or an emoji that I'm, that's representing me. But the younger generation definitely has avatars and online VR, AR worlds that they're interacting with. So having some supreme leader of a global universe that was sort of dictating the terms, as long as they're getting their DoorDash order delivered and they're, enjoying their internet speeds, there's a lot of people in their gaming environments. There's a lot of people that will give up moral ground, to
Right.
keep their lifestyles and keep their heads, because I think the heads come off at some point too. So it's an interesting game we're playing with, trying to figure out the scenario. But I don't want to diminish the fact that, because I think sometimes you get into this world where you're talking about abstract things, and then in Israel you're worried about real things, which is the
Yeah.
bombs or the potential attacks like October 7th last year. So it's very much a reality there right now today. So tell people out there what they can do to help kind of support you and the people there in this time.
The number one thing, of course, is to pray for us, to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. That is not just a cliche, that's very much needed, which means we need to pray for God's perfect shalom to be a force field, if you will, that surrounds us, that saturates us on the inside and surrounds us without. I often pray this when I drive. I will pray, Abba, please saturate me with your shalom, protect me on the inside with it, and then make it a force field that is around me as I drive. Driving is the most dangerous thing to do here in Israel. It's far more dangerous than any terrorist. More people die from car accidents, from crazy drivers here than ever do from terrorists. So the big number, it's a big risk. And driving in Jerusalem is a nightmare. So I literally pray this. Please, Abba, surround me with your shalom and let it extend to all the drivers around me. May they be struck with it in such a way they don't know why suddenly they feel so calm. And I think that's a valid prayer. And I think it's the kind of thing we should be praying for Israel right now. It's a kind of prayer that I very much would appreciate. I think it's a kind of prayer cover. So praying for the peace of Jerusalem means praying for the shalom of God to protect his people. And Israel is his land. The Jews are they're members of Yeshua's human family. How can we not love them and care for them and identify with them and be with them in their time of fear, anxiety, and grief? Now, I do see some organizations doing practical things, and that like I know of one group right now that is providing food boxes to put in shelters all across Israel. I think that's a great idea. And they're putting water in, right? So they're actually taking steps to move out and do something. So if you run across opportunities to help and you have the means to do so, I think that would be very meaningful. Other than that, it's easy to say, what, just pray? Well, prayer is the number one thing, right? The angels of God are real. They are his special forces. And I think we can call on them with humility, not with arrogance. Inasmuch for angels of the Most High God, inasmuch as Abba authorizes you to do so, and in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach Adonai, I call on you to stand guard around my family, around my home, around my community, around my church. around Israel.
Mm.
You know, I think that's valid. Again, we're told we're going to have the authority. We have some authority. I don't think we wield. I think sometimes when I hear people wielding that authority, it sounds very arrogant and very inappropriate.
Well, I mean, if you read Scripture, one of my favorite scriptures just talks about what Jesus did on the cross. He disarmed all the principalities and powers by his work on the cross.
Right. By suffering and dying.
Yeah, we have that authority that they've
Yeah.
been disarmed. Like they're not even as
Yeah.
powerful as they once were because of what happened on the cross. And the saints really do need to, with fervent prayer, move mountains. And the I think the cool thing about what's going to happen in the last days, end times, is that component of who has the courage, who's bold, who truly believes that Jesus Christ is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, who's serving Him. Who I believe that cowardice and this tepidness. I know that we all have that doubting Thomas moment where it's a little bit of doubt, etched in there, and I think that's part of our DNA and how we're designed. But I think whenever push comes to shove, and you have these moments where you stand for what you believe in, or you cave, I think for those saints that are bold and courageous and pray those fervent prayers, I think some of the coolest things that we've ever seen as believers is going to happen in the last days with a massive amount of people coming to know Jesus, miracles happening. Miracles are happening. I hear this all the time around the world. In Iran, I've heard that there's a huge, conversion of Christians
Exactly.
from Muslims,
Very, very well known.
and
phenomenon.
people are seeing Jesus like in visions, and He's healing people, and the dead are being raised, and they're confirmed reports. It's not just random theories. You just hear of things happening in Africa, in the Middle East, and Europe, in places that were very dark, and now the light is being spread. And it's very encouraging to know that worldwide the saints, because in the Bible Belt and in the States, sometimes you can have vertigo, Christian vertigo, in what's actually the right movement of God right now. But I think we're being unified as believers to just get rid of some of the denominational bear traps and start just to love God like you love yourself and love your neighbor. I mean, love God first, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. Those are the principles we need to all be living by first and foremost.
Yeah, relationship is the top priority, I think, very clearly in God's Word. Yep. I have heard it said, and I believe that the Ten Commandments, for example, are boundaries, necessary boundaries for us to have a healthy relationship with God and with each other. That's why they're there. So all of the commandments of God, all of the Word of God is intended to facilitate relationship, healthy relationships. The first and foremost thing, we're to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love our neighbors ourselves. The first and second greatest commandments, according to Yeshua, which are found in Torah. So there is an awful lot of theological, political infighting right now, where we're fighting over all kinds of secondary, unimportant. Well, I don't know if I want to have that on record. Where we're fighting over a lot of doctrines that are not primary doctrines, and it's okay to have different views on things. I think we need to allow that, and not allow that, and not let the fact that someone has a different political view or even a different theological view to keep us from being in a relationship. In as much as, what is it Paul says? In as much as it depends on you.
Yes.
Be at peace with all men. Now, there are a lot of things that we don't control, and there are people that are not going to want to be at peace with us, and that's fine. I mean, we can't control that. And there are some times, too, where we need to have healthy boundaries and we back away. But we are pursuing relationships. And I think this is very, very clear in Scripture, and I also think it's something that our Christianity has wandered away from.
Well, first of all, it's great catching up to you today, but please keep us updated, the Typical community updated on everything that's happening there. Obviously, I'm praying that there's not a war that breaks out, but knowing the tension there and knowing the significance of the upcoming sort of Jewish holidays that have spoken into some of these things happening, almost set your clock to it. I know that there'll be a lot of people praying for you, hoping that everything goes good, hoping that the drives that you have today and for the rest of the week are very safe. There's a lot of alert drivers around you.
Always pray for safety when driving here. Yeah, if you're going to pray for me about one thing, pray for me that I have safety when I'm on the road. I mean, it's crazy here. Is that the United States? When I drive in the United States now, I'm not there very often, but when I'm there, it's like I'm sitting in my living room. It just seems so peaceful.
Yeah. We have massive highways, big roads.
Yes. It's like, wow. And people are not honking every second at you. I mean, people hear honk, 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 honk. I mean, the light starts to turn and they're honking at you. Go,
Well, that's where road rage starts here.
Yeah. Well, it's a way of life here.
Well, I mean, you said, so yesterday morning I woke up on 635 here in Dallas, Texas. There was a multi-car crash. And one of the guys in the multi-car crash got mad when people getting out of their car started hitting them with his car, like on 635, which is a massive highway here. The highway got shut down. He was chasing people with his car,
My word.
and then got out and was trying to stab people. So keep your head on a swivel even here. So it's not like it's a utopia here for driving, but we have a lot more room. Typically speaking, even though some of our speeds are higher on the interstates, most of our accidents happen because of distracted drivers or drunk drivers. And by and large, we have, probably way less numbers that speak to fatality car crashes than probably Israel does because of all the road nuances there. But stay safe. Hey, keep us updated. If anything happens, let's do some breaking news on the scene there. And of course, your reports every week are fantastic. So keep up the good work.
Thank you, Brian. God bless.
All right, God bless. Talk to you soon.